Hello and welcome to this first Mirror newspaper review with me, Fleet Street Fox, and political correspondent Mikey Smith. We're going to take you through the best stories in today's papers and give you some inside information about the news you might not otherwise hear. There's some particularly intriguing tales we've got about Boris Johnson's holiday and his personal photographer, so stay tuned for those later on. And we want you to ask your own questions, ask us the thing that's niggling away at you, and we'll do our best to answer them. On all the front pages then, we've got talk of coronavirus, of course. I long for the day when it was full of Brexit. And talk of new restrictions, replacing the rule of 6. The Mirror's got this headline, tipping point in virus fight. Johnson to address the country and warn of nationwide restrictions if we're naughty. And government scientists are going to tell us that Britain faces a very challenging winter ahead. Now, Mikey, I don't understand this. We knew we were going to have a challenging winter. We've heard that since last winter. What's different? Why is this a big panic?
It's increasingly unclear how nobody thought this would be a problem, and particularly how this has become a tipping point, as the Mirror's front page suggests. This week, we've got a hastily arranged, possibly press conference, possibly not quite a press conference, really, with Chris Whitty and Patrick Vallance coming 11 o'clock this morning, where they're going to explain with new figures why everything's so terrible. And then we've got an address to the nation with Boris Johnson tomorrow. It's unclear why they're not doing it at the same time.
Yeah, all this stuff was very on, off. We're going to have one. We're not going to have one. We'll let you know later. What was the problem behind that? Why can't I just say, well, we're going to talk to you at 9 o'clock on Monday?
Well, do
they not know?
It's unclear whether they know what's going on from one day to the next. There is
not unclear.
Reportedly, there is reportedly quite a lot of tension within Number 10 within Number 10 within the cabinet about the way forward. You've got sort of half the cabinet who are very, very concerned, obviously, about the financial consequences, the consequences to the economy of putting more stringent lockdown measures in place, whether that's curfews of 10 o'clock, whether that's telling pubs and bars they can't open anymore, or whether that's full on telling people they have to stay at home again, or not mix with their families, especially with Christmas coming up. But then on the other hand, you've got Patrick Vallance and Chris Whitty, who are sort of coming out and saying there's a real problem here that needs to be addressed, which is slightly more important than the economy.
What does it mean when you've got the chief medical officer and the chief scientific advisor? Is he? They're addressing the nation and telling us what the problem is, and the Prime Minister is not coming out until tomorrow, maybe. Why is it? Because they always had these briefings, whether it was the three of them, and we had the political leadership and the scientific advice either side, and now it's just the scientific advice. Is that because they think we no longer listen to Boris Johnson?
Well, there's a certain amount of that. There's also a certain practical point, which is that Cabinet doesn't meet until tomorrow morning. So it's possible that they wanted the scientists to come out today and sort of get ahead of it and put some facts into it before the Cabinet decides on actually how to change the rules tomorrow morning, and then you've got Boris Johnson talking tomorrow afternoon. It was either that or bring Cabinet forward, which wouldn't have worked because all the ministers are coming back from their constituencies. There's a certain amount of timetabling which has, I think, led to this.
So is he trying to bounce the Cabinet into making the decision he wants, or are they hoping to present the problem to the country to see how the country responds before the Cabinet then decides what the country will wear?
I think it's a little bit of that way round, and also that they wanted. I genuinely don't know really what the scientists are going to say beyond what's been reported today about it being, a very difficult time coming up towards winter. But it's possible that the scientists are going to come out and say, look, this is a real problem, and they wanted to sort of gird everyone's loins a little bit ahead of an announcement by the Prime Minister. So when Boris Johnson comes up on telly tomorrow, no one's shocked because they've already been shocked by what's been said by the scientists.
Yeah,
you're seeing this lovely picture, which dropped out over the weekend of this argument within Number 10. There's a little bit of a story behind this.
Yeah, how
so obviously,
I wouldn't thought they would ever release something like this.
No, this looks like the kind of picture a rogue journalist takes when no one thinks he's looking. But what you've got there is you've got Chris Whitty, quite red-faced, clearly having making a forceful point inside Number 10. Boris Johnson not receiving it particularly well, and Matt Hancock in the background looking quite grey.
Well, looking like someone pulled his plug out at the mains. No, like Terminators on the vacuum. And it also looks, interestingly, it's the fact that the press advisors on either side of Boris and Dominic Cummings on the left and the centre. But then Whitty appears to be making eye contact with Cummings, and Cummings is leaning in. It's Cummings and Whitty that appear to be having the row. And it's the fact that Cummings is seen as the villain by so many people and seen as running Downing Street and the puppeteer of Boris Johnson. That's the thing which the Tories are always trying to get away from, and they're always saying it's ridiculous. And here we have a photograph which just appears to show the chief medical officers rowing with a puppeteer, and the puppets are just standing around him limp. In
his green gilet of some description. I'm not really sure what he's wearing there. But this picture, you'd think it was taken by a rogue photographer. It actually wasn't. It was taken by Boris Johnson's personal photographer. It's the same guy who, you remember that famous picture of Boris Johnson signing his resignation letter very carefully. It's the same photographer who has been brought in as the official Number 10 photographer. So this is an officially released picture by Number 10. And you've got to wonder why Number 10 would want to release a picture like this, which clearly shows division and argument within Number 10. And you wonder whether the point of releasing it is because Chris Whitty looks sort of angry and maybe a little, he's shooting his mouth off a bit. He's a bit out of control. I don't know. He's one of these, because there's always little lines in the papers about the tyrannical science boffins being in charge of everyone's lives, and you wonder if this has been put out to feed that a little bit.
It's not a good look, is it? But they're rolling out Whitty and they're rolling out Valence, and there's all this stuff in the other papers. In the Guardian, we've got, again, it's just been briefed. It's exclusive to all newspapers. It's briefed over the weekend. UK at this critical point, they warn the public. At the bottom of the Guardian, really interestingly, Lady Hale. You remember the judge at the Supreme Court who wore that? What was the brooch she wore? Like a serpent or something.
Spider.
Spider. That was it. The spider brooch. Who ruled against the prorogation and said that Boris was legal. She's saying, and she's written an essay saying that Parliament has surrendered its sovereignty to the government, to Boris Johnson. Normally, they'd have to pass all these new rules and restrictions through Parliament. And because of the Coronavirus Act, which said the government can do what it likes, this is what some of the anti-vaxxers are getting upset about, isn't it, when they're marching to Trafalgar Square? The government is just ruling by decree and saying, right, rule of 6, right, rule of 4, right, rule of 73.5, whatever it would be. And she says that the Parliament has surrendered its sovereignty, which I'd have thought should be a bigger thing than whatever Downing Street's briefed today, but that's just me. I don't edit a newspaper, do I?
Yeah, I mean, on the same line, you've got a lot of some of the more awkward MPs, particularly sort of the more libertarian Tory MPs, who are getting very angry about this. So you've got really a three-way row with the government wanting to sort of make sort of tweaks to everything by decree. You've got the scientists wanting them to go further and lock everyone down, and you've got apparently the former president of the Supreme Court and awkward squad Tory MPs saying, no, you must give us our freedoms, or at least let us vote on it.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting situation.
Well, we're going to see some stuff this week, perhaps, with the Tories rebelling, the backbenchers, and saying we're going to have more impact, more control over the regulations when they come in. Especially Boris announces some changes this week. His press conference definitely going ahead.
As far as I'm aware, yes. I don't think it will be a press conference. I think it will be an address to the nation. Do you remember that when he announced some of the lockdown measures, he put a table in the corridor. Yeah, and
lunatic.
Yeah, it's going to be another. Yes, it's going to be another one of those, as far as I'm aware. We're not expecting. I don't think at this stage the press to be present or to be able to ask questions. So that'll be nice.
Well, I hope it's shorter than the last one. It was really boring before. So we've got in the Times, we've got Johnson expects to announce further lockdown measures. We don't have any indication quite what those measures might be. There's talk about curfews and talk about perhaps in pubs, and perhaps talk about encouraging people to work from home again, which, you know, a fortnight after we're just all told to go back to the office. And as our viewer can see, we're and the interesting bit I've got in this Times thing here, in the second column, he talks about ministers have told the police and local authorities to strengthen their enforcement. This is half the problem, isn't it? That they've got all these rules and regulations. Not only are they confusing, almost none of them are being enforced. No one's being fined. There's a few people getting told off in a city park, and that's about it. So introducing new legislation, or new rules, I should say, is a complete waste of time, because everyone's just doing what they feel like doing, aren't they?
Yeah, to a certain extent. I think post Dominic Cummings' trip to Durham, I think everyone decided, or a lot of people decided, and it's sort of snowballed over time, that if not everyone has to follow the rules, that they shouldn't either. And you know, it's been a very long time. It's since March now, and people sort of get a bit numb to it.
Do you know what occurred to me this morning? I was taking my daughter on the school run, and she's only been back at school a week, right? And as you may hear, I've got a lurgy, got a terrible lurgy. It's the common cold. Doesn't matter. Not going to kill anybody, probably. But if the government launched a public information campaign and they said, we're going to eradicate the common cold this year, everyone wear a mask and everybody wash your hands, you know what? People would do it, because they've all got personal experience of how awful a cold can be and how it knocks you out. Yeah. They said, look, it destroys billions of pounds of productivity. It causes hospital admissions. It takes kids off school. Let's not have the common cold this year. Wash your hands, wear a face mask. No one would protest in Trafalgar Square about taking away their rights. And coronavirus is infinitely more serious and important than a cold, isn't it? It's just madness.
I wonder how much of it is, as you say, that people aren't seeing it. People don't have personal experience of it as much anymore. You know, there's not as many pictures of hospital wards. There's not as many stories about, you know, not enough ventilators being in hospitals, and as a result, people are sort of forgetting that it's a really nasty virus.
Well, most of the deaths were in care homes, and I think most people. I was speaking at the weekend to a cameraman who took part who filmed a panorama documentary in a care home. And people don't realise how bad a coronavirus death is in a care home. It's bad enough in a hospital, but in a care home, there's no doctor.
Yeah.
The night nurse is ringing a doctor to get permission to give an extra dose of painkillers, and can't get through to that doctor because that doctor's busy. You know, and all the night nurses in the local care homes are trying to get through for the same thing. They've only got so many painkillers. They are attuned to helping people through end-of-life care when you've got cancer, when you're old, when you've got dementia, and it's a very gentle shuffling off. Coronavirus is drowning in your own lungs, and they can't help you very much. They can care for you as much as they can, but they can't do it, and it's a horrific death, and it's even worse in a care home. You don't have a doctor. That's what people don't realise, that death in a care home is just really grim. It's nearly as grim as the second column in the Times. It says Priti Patel is calling on the Prime Minister to do this, that. Who would listen to Priti Patel? Who? I'm not going
that is very unclear to me.
Yeah. And this is the Telegraph. Now, this is brilliant. This line in the second paragraph jumped out and hit me. Boris Johnson is tomorrow expected to give the nation one final chance to prove it can follow the rules. What?
Yes.
What, Boris? What? How about you give Dominic Cummings no more chances to follow the rules and just sack him in May? What's that about?
That's a very good point. I mean, it was astonishing to me that over the weekend it was reported that people who don't self-isolate for 14 days, who test positive and don't self-isolate for 14 days could get fined up to £10,000 for not following the rules. And no one really thought that perhaps if you're sort of a relatively low-paid worker who can't work from home, say you work in a shop, and you're faced with the option of going to work while you're a bit ill or while you're very ill, or getting testing positive, having to stay at home and getting basically statutory sick pay for 2 weeks, and having to tell someone, all of your friends who you've been close to in the last 2 weeks, and have that happen to them as well. Why on earth would you go and get a test?
Exactly. And why would you give them your correct phone number?
Exactly.
Why would you give them your home address?
Yeah.
If you didn't,
I mean, countless times I've been in pubs and overheard people at the next table, saying their name is Mickey Mouse and saying their number is 077777777. It's been happening for months.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be surprised that people can't be tracked with test and trace.
No, it's bound to happen, isn't it? And when the threat is that it's the country's fault, as they're saying in the Telegraph, in the Daily Boris graph, it's the country's fault for not following the rules. Well, yeah, people aren't following the rules, and it is our own health, and we should follow the rules. But also, the government should be writing rules that are clear. They should be ordering that if you have to self-isolate because of a coronavirus test for you or your family, that your employer has to pay you sick pay for it. That's all they should do, right? They haven't got to pay out for work. They've got to pay, the employer pays the sick pay. And they should just say, look, and if you're going to give the proper phone number, and we're going to do a credit check when you get whatever. But it could be done so much better than this, couldn't it?
Yeah.
If I can think of a better way of doing it, and I'm an idiot, then
is it cruel? Is it cruel and basic? Is it cruel and basic to suggest that the reason that they haven't thought that any of these things would be a problem is because the country is mainly run by independently wealthy men?
You might have a point, and you might also have a point that I think as well. They think that when they won the election in December, that their 80-seat majority, that got them 5 years of government, right? And that's it.
Yeah.
And they can't be moved in that time. And there's an argument for that. But government and the people is it's a daily contract. And people can lose confidence in you like this, and they can change their minds. And they were expecting over the course of a parliament for Brexit to happen, and this to be slide off perhaps. But it hit a wall in May. There were all these surveys in April at the start of lockdown were showing huge public support for the government, huge support for Boris Johnson amongst Labour voters, amongst Tory voters, Brexit, Pro, Remain, Leave, everything. And then in May, it just dropped off a cliff because everyone said, well, you're not following the rules, you're not governing. And if you're not governing, then we're not going to be governed. And people are doing their own thing. I'm surprised we're not having bin fires in the streets, to be honest. But it's because we're British. We're still queuing, even though it's anarchy, theoretically.
There's a teeny tiny story in the Sun in a corner of a page that reveals that secret polling leaked from Downing Street suggests that 26% of people agree that the government is putting in place the right measures to protect people. It's the lowest score ever.
26%?
26%.
So 3/4 of people think the government is doing crap.
Yeah.
Surprised that's that low, to be honest. Now this story, you know all about this. This is brilliant. This is a story that's appeared in the Italian press. It's been picked up here, and Number 10 is in day denial, but they haven't quite denied it in the way you think they would. Now the claims are that Boris Johnson flew to Italy last weekend, perhaps for the christening of his baby Wilf, and that the Italian press have reported the airport saying he definitely came through. He's quite a noticeable bloke. You'd think he'd have been spotted. And the Downing Street are calling it totally untrue. So what's going on?
So where this came from, La Repubblica, an Italian newspaper, reported this sort of 9 o'clock last night. And it's fascinating because the story comes from a press release that was sent out by Perugia Airport. And it was sort of backed up by a couple of people who worked in the airport, saying that Boris Johnson came through the airport over that weekend, the weekend of September 12th and 13th. We think because the airport wanted to make themselves look special. They wanted to. It was basically they put out this press release saying how many like famous people had come through at their airport in the last month. Exactly, we get loads of, they said Tony Blair had also been through. It's unclear where he was going, but you know, he might have just been going on holiday. Because you're allowed to go to Italy without quarantine currently. Not allowed to go to France, where I was supposed to be going in a couple of weeks, but. But so yes,
the allegation, if it's an allegation, the suggestion is that he went to Evgeny Lebedev, the Russian billionaire, oligarch, newspaper owner's mansion, and had his gathering for 30 or 40 people for young baby Wilf there, as opposed to in rainy old Blighty, which is how everyone had been given to understand they had their christening.
Yes, there were reports of the top secret christening with a handful of friends and family last week, but they didn't say where it was, obviously, because it was a secret gathering. But it would be extraordinary if he went all the way to Italy to be in the to have this ceremony in the mansion of a Russian oligarch who he has just made a peer. Let's not forget. Yes. He's just given Mr. Lebedev a peerage.
He holidayed in, hasn't he, with Katie Price? Yes. Which must have been a hell of a dinner party. And what's interesting to me, when you start picking holes in what they say, is that they say in here that he's supposed to have landed at Perugia Airport on September the 11th at 2 p.m. So it's a very specific time and day. And someone's gone to Downing Street and said, "Is this what's happened here?" And they've said it is totally untrue, quote unquote. Now that means it's untrue he landed on September the 11th at 2 p.m.
Potentially, yes.
They haven't said he did not go to Perugia. The christening was in Britain. It would still be secret if they said it was in the UK. So that leaves open the possibility he very much went to Italy on September the 11th at 1:55 p.m. Doesn't it?
It does. It really does. We've got a lobby briefing with Number 10 about 12 o'clock, and I expect it'll make up quite a lot of it.
Go for it, Mikey. Right. What else we've got? The Daily Mail, the care homes test. Now, this is another thing which the government's had a big problem with, is the testing, number one, care homes, number two. And the Mail's done a survey here. They've spoken to 19 providers of care homes running 393 homes, and staff or residents tested positive at a third of them in the past fortnight. And in most cases, the results were shambolically late. They had to wait up to 15 days for a result from a test. 9 of them said they even had to throw away the tests after the couriers didn't turn up on time, because there's a time limit on these tests to get them back to the lab. And 1 even had to ditch 250 tests in a week. Now, these are the private tests that get sent out, the Serco tests, sent out by courier, and which Matt Hancock likes to say, we're testing 200,000 people a day, not saying that 250 of them have been thrown in a bin.
That's an important point. When they count the tests, they count them when they're sent out to care homes, as I understand it, rather than when the results are delivered, which in apparently many cases they are not. I mean, this is just the latest in a string of problems with care home testing. That about a month or so ago, there was a really big issue where one of the major testing firms, who was supplying almost all tests to care homes, a firm called Randox, had to withdraw all of their tests and tell care homes to stop using them because there was a risk of contamination in the test itself. So hundreds of thousands of tests had to be scrapped.
They've known about these problems with the test for so long. They've known the tests they have relied on have got a 30% false positive rate. They've known winter was happening. They've known September was going to involve children going back to school and parents going back to work. They spent all of August saying, you must all go to the pub and we're going to subsidise you, and you must all go back to work and you must do this. And it still seems to have taken them by surprise. And yet care homes, the thing which was so disastrous for them earlier in the year, do you think that was the one place, I mean, that needs a protective ring? If only Matt Hancock had one.
Yeah, it's astonishing. It's a cascading snowball of errors that have built up to this apparently insurmountable problem at the end.
Yeah. Right, we're just going to go to our last story now. If anyone's watching this has some questions, we're going to answer them at the end. So tap them down, add them to the comments on this, and we do get to see them. And the person running the broadcast does ask them of us. Ask them. We don't care if they're mad. We don't care if they're rude, because I quite like dealing with those, actually, to be honest. So just ask the questions. We'll answer them later. Now, at the front of the Daily Star, we've had our panics about sourdough. We've had our panics about bread flour and toilet rolls, and now apparently we're panicking about turkeys. We're gobbling them up already. What people don't seem to realise is the turkeys aren't actually ready yet. This year's turkeys are still like this big. They grow over the year. So any turkeys you're buying from the supermarket now, firstly, they're last year's turkeys, and they've been in their ages. And secondly, you want a good turkey, you want to get it in December, which is all the entire turkey production of the United Kingdom is geared up to produce a big fat bird in December. Not in September. It's a waste of time. What are these people doing?
My favourite part of this story is the panic buyer who was quoted as saying, "I've got 6 turkeys in the freezer, taking no chances." What do you think is going to happen to the other? How many do you need? I mean, surely just one is.
Especially
why are you stockpiling turkeys?
You know what they're doing? This isn't panic buying. This is Del Boy, and it was the same with the toilet rolls. Del Boy's gone out. He's bought 6, and he's going to sell them all for 200% markup on the street corner come December the 20th, because no one will be able to get a turkey, and that none of them have realised the turkeys will all come on the market on December the 20th, and he won't make any money on this at all.
Well, this is a question. Would you buy second-hand meat? Or I'm not sure I'd buy raw meat from a man on a corner. I don't know.
No, I think it depends how desperate you are for turkey. Maybe this year.
Yeah, I think I'd just have chicken.
Yeah. Right, we've got a question. Oh, we've got a viewer. Cassie James says, what's going to happen to cancer treatments with all of this lockdown and restrictions? And we've seen lots of stuff about people missing their outpatient appointments, people not going to their GPs with the first symptoms. If you're going to have further restrictions, it's going to get worse, isn't it? Plainly.
Potentially. I mean, the NHS have said all along, if you need treatment, if you need to be seen by a doctor, go. I think part of the problem is that when you go to hospital, still, as I understand it, you can't have anyone with you. You've got to go on your own. My mum, bless her heart, had an angina attack while I was visiting her in Sheffield. I assure you it had nothing to do with me. But she had to get to hospital in the middle of the night, and I couldn't go with her, which was horrendous. But she did go, and she was seen to really quickly, and things are still happening in hospitals. So I think
they've got this huge backlog, haven't they, that's built up over the year. And I think I saw something last week that was saying that they're going to have to run the waiting list, and the clinics are going to have to run something like 135% capacity in order to clear that backlog, which means less time with each patient, which means more overtime. It means trying to run clinics later at night. I mean, you'd have to have, I know the NHS is 24 hours anyway, but you'd have to have the clinics that are normally open during the day, they'd have to go on 24 hours as well in order to try and rush this stuff through. And then are people getting the best treatment?
Yeah.
But, to answer your question, Cassie, we don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be probably quite difficult. And they really ought to find a way around it. You'd have thought. Now, Stephen Bork, why hasn't martial law not been brought in? Double negative, Stephen. Why hasn't martial law been brought in to tackle the virus? Soldiers can't really fight a virus, number one. I think you mean perhaps martial law on the streets to control the human beings, to make them all stay indoors. But part of the problem with that would be, I think, that the government's rules have changed so often and been so confusing that if we sent the army onto the streets to control the populace, they would be controlled to stay at home in April. They'd be controlled to sent to Barnard Castle in May. They'd be made to go down the pub in August, and they'd be told to go to work in September and then come back home again in September, whatever we're on, 22nd. So the soldiers would be just as confused as the rest of us, Stephen. That's why we don't have martial law and also democracy.
Yes, that one.
Part of it.
That's where I was going to go.
Yeah, we'll deal with this.
I mean, the awkward squad of Tory MPs are up in arms as it is, and we're just being told not to go to the pub with other people.
They'd quite like it, surely. Like Joe Public, I don't think Joe's using his right name. I don't think that's his picture either. No, I think Joe might well be not supplying his correct details to the coronavirus test and trace program. How are we, the British public, supposed to voice our anger over these draconian dictated measures? You're on Facebook, aren't you, Joe? If we're forbidden to gather and beaten by authority batons in Trafalgar Square when we do, what has happened to the right to protest? The same thing as what's happened to capitals and punctuation, I imagine. You are voicing your anger, Joe. You're on Facebook. You're telling us how angry you are. So that's number one. That's easier than it was before Facebook was created in 2004. So count your lucky stars. And you do have the right to protest in Trafalgar Square. You have been protesting in Trafalgar Square. Thousands of people have been going there and talking about. Did you see any of that, Mikey? I saw a clip. Yes. The claims that we're being harvested as like data batteries for a new world order, who are going to make us all wear face nappies, and then we're going to be gassed or something. I don't understand how, if we're being harvested for our biometric data, that gassing us would then be a reason to keep us alive, wouldn't you? Surely. Yeah. So you do get to go, but because we don't want people like Joe Public dying, they are suggested that they don't sneeze on each other in Trafalgar Square. So you do get all this. You do have those rights. And the fact that you are able to complain you don't have the rights is proof that you have exactly that right, isn't it? That is freedom of speech. Yeah. If you sit there and moan about freedom of speech, yes, you have. You just exercised it. I think anyone who thinks we don't have the right to protest in this country should probably spend a day in Westminster, where our office is, when I'm not in my glorious tiny home in London. Because last time I was in there for a few days last week or the week before, and every day there was a set of drummers who I believe were there with Extinction Rebellion, and they were drumming from. Well, it was like a marching band drum section. And they were there from 9 in the morning until at least 6 in the evening, constantly drumming all day. It was just the soundtrack to my life for that week. So if you can do that, I'm pretty sure you can assemble anywhere. Yeah, it must be quite difficult though, being sitting at home in a nice quiet room when you don't have that kind of stuff in the background. It's hard to concentrate. I can't cope in silence. I've been in newsrooms for too long. I quite like people swearing around me, and we're not allowed to swear on Facebook. And I'm not allowed to swear in my own house now because my daughter can hear things. So anyway, there's the papers for you. We've been through them. Hope you've had some what do we call it, added value and some explanations of what's going to be happening today in the news and how it's going to pan out during the week. And keep an eye, I reckon, on that Boris Johnson Perugia story, because that one is going to unravel. There's a little thread there I can see being pulled by the likes of Mikey, who are going to niggle at it until something comes of it. And obviously we look forward to Boris Johnson's address to the nation, in which he will probably, I bet you, he'll do that again. Yeah, right. A lot of that. Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much, everybody. Get back to work.